Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to Daybreak Show, reaching you live from the nation's capital here in Abuja, right here on Trust Television. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thank you for joining. Of course, I'm not alone in the studio. Ibrahim, good morning.
Good morning, Ayuba. How was your night?
Well, it was a great moment of refreshment, so to say.
Yeah, well, for those of us who had a quick turnaround, it wasn't that easy, exactly.
Yeah, I can imagine trying to wake up that early,
exactly.
Just to make it here.
Exactly.
And we made it a duty for us to always keep Nigerians informed on all the issues that they need to know, and also bring analysis to issues of national importance right here on Daybreak Show.
Exactly. That's what we do.
Yeah. All right. So let's begin with the headlines this morning. The first one says, ethnic comment, Northern elders distance self from Atiku.
And still talking politics, 2023 INEC summons parties over Electoral Act violation, attacks on opponents.
Police kill 2 kidnappers, recover 8.4 million ransom paid in Bauchi.
Now for the details. The Arewa Joint Committee has joined the widespread condemnation of a comment made by the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, during his interface with the committee on Saturday. Speaking with journalists, the chairman steering committee, Malam Murtala Aliyu, said the same question administered to Atiku was asked other candidates, adding that every response expressed by the various candidates of the various political parties is solely their opinion and has nothing to do with the fundamental objectives of the Joint Committee. The Joint Committee further stressed that the interactions were not planned with the goal of endorsing any candidate, adding that the maiden edition only sought to address the challenges of the North by any candidate who emerged victorious in the forthcoming election. Meanwhile, presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party and former Vice President of Nigeria, Atiku Abubakar, has traveled to Europe. The former Vice President left the country hours after he met Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, presidential candidate of the All Progressive Congress, at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja. There are reports that the PDP candidate left the country to seek medical attention, but Paul Ibe, his spokesman, denied this, saying Atiku went on a business trip.
All right, now 2 suspected kidnappers have been killed during an exchange of gunfire by police operatives at Mainamaji village, Al-Galeri local government area of Bauchi State. The police equally arrested a 20-year-old kidnapper, Abubakar Isa, who was in possession of 8.4 million naira suspected to be ransom money generated from the victims. They also recovered an SMG rifle with 92 live ammunition, 1 empty magazine SMG OFN rifle, 1 7.62 mm caliber of live ammunition, and 8 different models of phones. Bauchi State Commissioner of Police CP Umar Mamman Sanda, who paraded the suspects and other criminals Tuesday in Bauchi, said that security concerns in the society have assumed alarming dimensions, ranging from gender-based violence, thuggery, armed robbery, kidnapping, and banditry, among others. The police commissioner noted that the suspect alleged to have criminally conspired with others while armed with AK-47 rifles, pistols, and other dangerous weapons, carried out a series of kidnapping, armed robbery, banditry, and cattle rustling along Al-Galeri, Das, Tafa Balewa, Ogoro, and Toro local government areas of Bauchi State.
Now, circling back to politics, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has convened a meeting with leaders of political parties over the rising spate of violence heralding campaigns for the 2023 elections. The INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, said this in Abuja during a training of master trainers on election technology for the 2023 general elections. Now, according to him, the clashes between opposition parties and their supporters during the ongoing campaigns across the country is worrisome. Yakubu's alarm is coming barely 3 weeks after the signing of a peace accord by political parties and their presidential candidates, as championed by the National Peace Committee.
All right. So let's take a look at some of the packages we have for you this morning. Bread is a favorite food for many families, but the rise in prices is changing all that. Bread is now going beyond the reach of the poor. Abdullahi Amadi reports that some bakeries in Katsina are struggling to survive the harsh economic realities. Take a look.
In Katsina, over 250 bakeries have collapsed, while about 310 struggling to remain in the business as a result of the high cost of baking materials. Even those that are trying to strike a balance are producing way below par, resulting in loss of jobs along the value chain. The industry is burdened by an unprecedented cost of materials, compounded by unpredictable cost of diesel and exchange rate, which has led to loss of over 6,000 jobs.
The flour, which we used to buy like 12,000, 11,500 before, is now 27,500, almost to 28,000. The oil, which is the groundnut oil we used to do it, is almost 32,000 plus. Sugar is 30,000, 31,000 plus, I believe. And other materials, even the firewood. So that's the reason why there is increment of prices in all the breads for now.
Here, only 3 staff remain out of 42, baking 3 bags of flour daily instead of 18 bags in the past. Even at that, they resorted to producing what they called chin-chin bread to meet the demand of the majority that cannot afford a loaf of bread. Why are you asking this kind of question? In any case, this is a business. If I cannot make profit, I have to have a rethink. I honestly pity the young chaps I sacked from this bakery. I used to see some of them touting while others are scavenging, but this is against my wish. Bakers are not happy that the government has not shown concern for their plight, which forced many to produce below capacity and downsize the number of their staff. They are also saying the industry is at the verge of collapsing if nothing is done urgently to salvage bakeries. The industry is key to the sustenance of socio-economic well-being of the people of Katsina State, considering the number of people along the value chain. As a leader, if I tell you that I am happy with the closure of some bakeries, I am lying. I urge government to come to our aid. Beyond that, those who are detached from the value chain or sacked have now resorted to scavenging, with many at the mercy of elements. Describing the situation as worrisome, the national president of Association of Master Bakers and Caterers of Nigeria is appealing to government to give them a bailout to prevent the risk of total collapse of the industry.
We are in very serious, challenging situations. The situation is daunting because a lot of our members have shut down their bakeries. About 30 to 40 and it's 5% of our members nationwide have shut down the bakeries and are still counting. The situation is not encouraging at all.
Unless this is done quickly, observers are saying the future of the industry in Nigeria is bleak and poses threat to the fragile peace being enjoyed in some parts of the country. Abdullahi Ismail, Trust Television News, Katsina.
It seems like the economic realities are biting hard now.
I mean, going by what the report is suggesting, and I agree totally that, a staple food like bread is going out of reach of the ordinary Nigerians.
Because it was something that you could always count on.
Exactly. And, it's something that it calls for concern. Forces both within and beyond are responsible for this. We are seeing that the way our currency, the Naira, has depreciated in value is causing the buying of some of the ingredients used for the bread at a very high cost. We are also seeing the Russia-Ukraine war, which we all know that these are two countries that are major suppliers of wheat, a major ingredient for the production of bread. And then, of course, energy crisis. You know, again, Russia, Ukraine is major because diesel and the rest of them, some of them,
and the bakers have no choice but to jack up the prices.
Exactly,
because the cost of production has skyrocketed.
Exactly, and I mean, the impacts are there. Unemployment, you could hear from him how they have had to let go of some of their staff as a result of this, and it's really sad. I hope that we are able to come out of this as soon as possible.
Yeah, well, that is the hope, and we do hope that things get better sooner rather than later. All right, moving on now to matters of governance. President Muhammadu Buhari has cautioned ministers, permanent secretaries and heads of government agencies that abandoning the business of governance for electioneering will be viewed seriously. Now, the president gave the warning on Tuesday at State House Abuja at the closing ceremony of the 2022 Ministerial Performance Review Retreat. He had earlier signed Executive Order 12, which gives legal backing to improving performance management, coordination and implementation of presidential priorities. Kende Amodu reports.
With every passing day, the president is making things crystal clear that his administration is winding down, and now is the time to concentrate on leaving behind an enduring legacy. He's also instilling in members of government the same thinking, which is why he's telling participants at this retreat that the business of governance must continue to receive the needed attention despite the commencement of campaigns towards the 2023 general elections. Apparently, it is not too early to map out a transition plan for the incoming administration to ensure proper documentation of all policies, programs, and projects of government.
I have just shared with you a summary recommendations from some of the panel's discussions. My office will develop a detailed report on the recommendations from all the panel discussion sessions, including the technical sessions, which will be shared with all cabinet members.
The president has also directed the Ministry of Petroleum Resources to ensure the completion of the reorganization of the new agencies unbundled from the defunct Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation by the end of the first quarter of 2023. At the same time, he wants the National Assembly to fast-track the consideration and passage of key legislative bills.
With the commencement of the electioneering campaign to the 2023 general elections, the business of governance must continue to receive the needed attention during this period. Consequently, all ministers, permanent secretaries, and heads of agencies must remain focused in discharge of their duties.
Earlier presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress in next year's election, Bola Tinubu, had in a goodwill message giving assurances that his government, if elected into power, would give the deserved recognition to the legacy of the Buhari administration.
The way and means of a Tinubu government will be devoted to further project and prosper the Nigerian people, because our guiding principle will be to provide the best of progressive governance.
The signing of Executive Order 12 is expected to institutionalize a culture of accountability and transparency in the pursuit of good governance. From State House, Abuja, Kende Amodu, Trust TV News.
Well, that was the president there, quite timely. It's a call that it's needed at this time because if you look at the fact that the campaigns, you know, I would say has set in already.
Exactly.
You know, and the ruling party, the APC being the ruling party, you would have a lot of them, some looking to retain their seats, some looking to go for other seats,
exactly.
You know, and all that. So it's only right that the president, you know, made this call so that people, Nigerians, will not have to be the ones to suffer for it.
Exactly, because it's very easy for them to take their eye off the ball. I mean, like really, you have an election campaign to run, you have governance to do. I mean, it's quite difficult for them to juggle that. So I think the reminder is quite apt. I mean, like you have a job to do, do this job, and then you can go ahead and and do whatever it is.
Very, very critical. All right, now let's take a look at some other stories. The chairman, Senate Committee on the Review of the 1999 Constitution, and the Deputy President of the Senate, Ovie Omoh-Agege, has lamented that only 11 states have voted and complied with the constitutional amendment carried out earlier this year, while 25 states are yet to consider and vote. Omoh-Agege stated this at a joint press conference on constitutional amendments and the latest developments at the National Assembly on Tuesday. Here's the report.
The Deputy Senate President Ovie Omoh-Agege accused some state governors of interfering in affairs of state assemblies, thereby turning state lawmakers towards themselves for their selfish gains, as a result of which meaningful contribution is yet to be made to the constitution review process.
If there are bills there that you're not comfortable with, vote it down. But to hold it hostage, you are holding the entire exercise hostage, you are holding the entire country hostage. And that's what we're against. And we thought it is right that the Nigerian people, through the media, understand who is holding this hostage at this particular time.
On state policing, President of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Ayuba Waba, commended the Constitution Review Committee for transparency and fairness.
I can say that this process has been followed up to the latter, from the public hearings in the 12 states to the public hearing here in this National Assembly chambers. And Nigerians freely canvass for position on all those issues. And I remembered the position of NLC about the state police was very clear. Check the history of thuggery in Nigeria and also insecurity. How do we actually empower political thugs to now become bandits and even become Boko Haram? Check the history very well. It started with political thuggery. And clearly, our position is we are not matured for that.
Senator Omoh-Agege, who is also the co-chairman, Joint Senate and House of Representatives committees on the review of the 1999 Constitution, noted that consultants had recommended over 66 bills from the public hearings and memos submitted by the public.
Well, it seems like the constitutional amendment is dragging longer than anticipated. I mean, like it was something that we thought was going to fly through, but unfortunately, we're still dragging it.
Especially if you look at also some of the bills that are there, they have been, you know, sharp division about the position of, you know, what the law should say about state policing and all of that. Again, just like re-echoed by the, you know, president of the NLC, where he's saying that Nigeria is not matured enough. Maybe our politicians are not mature enough to carry through with the issue of state policing. There are those who say, well, I mean, one way or another, we're already
there
practicing
this. State policing,
and then if you look at the issue of insecurity that the country is dealing with right now, you would think that, look, perhaps it's time. I mean, and also the consensus by governors, you know, and other well-meaning Nigerians, traditional rulers, and the rest of them, that it's time for us to have the state policing, regardless of whatever,
because of the insecurity.
You know, the issue is. Because at the end of the day, even as it were, right now, some governors still influence the police in one way or another,
states, in
their various states. So if you are talking about intimidation of opponents by governors and the rest of them, is still happening even as we speak.
One way or the other.
So one way or another, they will do it. If they don't use the conventional police, they will use drugs, you know, and all that. So we just need to face it. I mean, we have vigilantes set up in virtually
every state
right now. What's the aim? The aim is to deal with the issue of insecurity.
Armed by the state government and
exactly, and some of them are not armed. If you look at Amotekun, for instance, that have been complaining, and several others, they are not armed because the formalities that is required has not been followed through, you know, completely. So why don't we just, you know, face it? and do it.
Well, it's the bottom line is a lot needs to be done before this can actually pass through.
Perhaps we need to do some more lobbying or consultation.
All right. Well, moving on there. Uganda's High Commissioner to Nigeria, Nelson Ochega, wants cooperation between African countries in education, trade, and security and other areas of development for Africa strengthened for the continent to thrive at a global stage. Now, speaking against the backdrop of Nigeria-Uganda relations and the Uganda National Day celebration in Nigeria, during an interview with Trust TV, the Ugandan ambassador harped on the need for a change of mindset for Africa to do business within the continent.
As somebody who has been in Nigeria for quite some time, I can say with confidence that there is a lot that Uganda can bring to Nigeria, and there is a lot that Nigeria can take to Uganda. In terms of trade, for example, currently our trade volumes are very, very low. What Nigeria exports to Uganda does not exceed $10 million per annum. And the same for Uganda. But that does not mean that there are no tradable goods. They are there. In the case of Uganda, we can bring here milk and other milk products. We can bring here coffee. We can bring here tea. We can bring here wheat. We can bring tobacco. We can bring flowers. They have attended very many functions in Nigeria, and I see the role flowers play in beautifying and making functions cultural and very beautiful. So that's what we can bring from Uganda to Nigeria. From Nigeria to Uganda, you have very good fabrics. You have very good artworks and art crafts. You know, you have we have not benefited from your oil as yet. You can sell as oil and oil products. The market is there. Right now we are struggling to get those products from other parts of the world, but we are not getting it from Nigeria. And yet the Federal Republic of Nigeria is the biggest producer of crude oil in the continent. So what does that mean? It means that we are challenged to scale up these very good bilateral relations so that it can benefit our traders. And the beauty now is that we have got both Uganda and Nigeria as signatories to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Through this mechanism, I am calling upon all the stakeholders, both in government and in the private sector, to take advantage of this framework so that we can scale up trade between Uganda and Nigeria. When we scale up trade between Uganda and Nigeria, it means we can also scale up trade between East Africa and West Africa. Because Uganda is a member of the East African Community. And in the East African Community as a regional bloc, we have registered very significant milestones. We have a customs union, we have a common market. We are now discussing the establishment of a single currency. Nigeria is a leading member of ECOWAS. And the same milestones that we have registered, probably in East Africa, have also been registered in ECOWAS.
Well, the way to go, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
This is exactly where we should be heading as Africans. We must trade with each other. That way we can be able to become more and more independent sort of.
Exactly.
You know,
economically independent.
I mean, exactly. I mean, COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine war, you know, is opening our eyes and re-emphasizing the need to go this way.
Exactly, to look within, and that is the way to go. I mean, like, we've been talking about this for so long, and it's there's no time like the present.
True. All right, we'll take a short breather now, and then when we return, we'll take a look at the dailies on Daybreak this morning. Please stay with us.
When the situation where you find that they look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.
I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying. Time for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. We'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. It says, the lead story says, despite 1 billion naira allocation, Constitution amendment in limbo. The writer says 25 states withhold votes over state police and others. Your threat won't intimidate us, the Deputy Senate President there. Governors frustrating review, NGF mum. Why we wrote to National Assembly, speakers speaking. And then we also have above the lead story, 7 months to go, Buhari orders ministers to prepare transition documents, and that's on page 32. Boko Haram killed 100,000, displaced over 2 million people. That's according to the defense chief on page 34. NLNG, force majeure, Nigerians may pay more for cooking gas. You also would find INEC summons parties over Electoral Act violation, attacks on opponents, and that's on page 33. Bandits attack Niger hospital, kill 2, abduct doctor, others, and on page 6. Kano, NNPP, PRP governorship candidate commit to media trust election debate on page 32. You would also find a pictorial there showing you Ukrainian prisoners of war pose for a picture after a swap in an unknown location in Ukraine. Below that, at the footnote, you would find Bua to Kogi. We are no longer interested in 50,000 hectare land. Investors may shun state over hostility, according to experts. And that's on page 23. Not forgetting that we still have 11 schoolgirls of FGC Birni Yawuri is 489 days still in captivity. One student of Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, is 462 days still in captivity. That's that for the Daily Trust.
All right, next paper we're looking at is The Nation newspaper this morning, and it carries this major headline on the front page: How I Will Boost Economy, Enhance Security by Tinubu. APC candidate promises to sustain Buhari's legacies. That is the major headline on the front page of The Nation newspaper. Going down the front page there, right below, is the headline: Buhari to unveil Tinubu's campaign document, Council on Friday. And moving towards the top of the front page here, talking business now, how Nigeria can achieve industrialization by Dangote. Circling back to politics is the headline that reads: North's elders disown Atiku's "Don't Vote Yoruba Igbo" comment. And towards the top of the front page there, above the nameplate, Wike endorses Sanwo-Olu for second term, dumps PDP candidate. Governors demand state police, others as constitution review stalled. That is on page 25 of The Nation. And Bank of America predicts Naira depreciation. Details of that on page 7. Army leads exercise to rout criminals in Lagos, Ogun. You can find details of that on page 25. Still on the front page of The Nation newspaper, Osun Oyo governments to deliver 91-kilometer Ibadan Iwo Shogbo Road in 2 years. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of The Nation newspaper this morning.
All right, so let's take a look at other papers. You have this day newspaper as well. The lead story there says, you can't abandon work for election campaign, Buhari warns. That's one of the reports we saw earlier. The writer says penalty awaits violators of order, directs SGF ministers to prepare transition documents, sign Executive Order 12 to institutionalize accountability and transparency. And then you also have floods, built dams, desealed major rivers. Okoa urges federal government. The writer says Diri seeks FG's support, directs workers to go on 1-week break. Niger Delta Affairs Minister promises medical infrastructural relief to Bayelsa, Rivers, others. INEC chair expresses concern over attack on PDP rally in Kaduna. President to inaugurate APC Presidential Campaign Council Friday. So these are the stories on the front page of this day.
Next, we take a look at the Punch newspaper this morning, and it carries this major story on the front page. Political rally attacks. INEC summons parties. Police plan 13 billion naira firearms purchase. And it comes with riders here. They say IG, INEC chair to meet Adamu, IU party leaders over violent campaigns. Our governorship candidate did not mastermind attack on PDP rally, says Kaduna APC, while Northern Coalition to publish Atiku Tinubu Obi's promises. That's the major headline on the front page of the Punch newspaper. Moving towards the bottom of the page now, flood victims battle hunger, risk disease in Anambra. Details of that on page 26. FG to complete Lagos-Ibadan Expressway in December. And still on that same belt, I don't know who killed Ataga. I fled in fear, says Chidima. Details of that on page 28. Ogun workers quit Chinese factory, protest colleague's death. That is another story on the front page of the Punch newspaper. Going towards the top of the front page, below the nameplate, incoming administration to inherit $716 million judgment debts. And more IOCs to divest, job losses loom, says NUPRC boss. Details of that on page 27. At the very top of the front page is another belt. Tinubu launches campaign, unveils manifesto on Friday. And Nigerians pay over 1 trillion naira tax to 36 states. Moving on to insecurity, it says insurgency killed 100,000, displaced 2 million, says the Chief of Defense Staff. Details of that can be found on page 15. And right at the top of the front page there, terrorism, Lafarge's Nigeria stock plunges amid $778 million fine. Details of that on page 36. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning.
All right. So let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper this morning. The lead story says violent campaigns. INEC summons political parties for dumping peace accord. Now the writer says 2023, Buhari directs SGF to begin action on handover. Don't abandon governance. President warns as APC launches PCC on Friday. I will continue with Buhari's legacy, says Tinubu. Atiku off to Europe as PDP insists on issues-based campaign. Shareholders advocate peaceful pause and then coordination in judicial processes. Constitution, 25 states hide behind state police, local government autonomy to frustrate amendment. You also find 2023, that's above, just below the masthead there, you would see 2023, North has not endorsed any presidential candidate, Arewa leaders clarify. Rivers Delta monarchs berate FG for not visiting flood victims. We are being married off to pay debts, Yobe children cry out. Bandits kill monarch, 4 others, kidnap 17 in Niger and Plateau. And then these are the stories on the Guardian newspaper this morning. All right, so let's get perspectives to these stories on the front pages this morning. We have Ben Shema, the Director of News, Voice of Nigeria, to give us perspectives. Thank you for joining us this morning on the...
My pleasure. All men are seated. Where's Stella?
Stella needed a breather. Yes. So, quite interesting stories this morning we are seeing. Yesterday, the National Assembly, the Deputy Senate President was, blowing hot, expressing his frustration and dissatisfaction with the way the constitutional amendment is going on. And this is a project that a lot of money have been spent on. I mean, we are seeing that 1 billion naira at least have been spent on the constitution amendment. Yet we are seeing that there's a lot of delays, and the states are blamed for it. 25 states withholding votes over state police and all of that. What's the implication of this? I mean, this is an election season. Very, very soon, a lot of politicians at the national level, campaigns have begun already, and the states are going to be starting theirs in a matter of weeks. So what's then going to happen to the whole process?
What's then going to happen to the whole process is just frustrating the process. And look, the governors who indeed are seeing the state assemblies as just some mere agencies they could just direct. Check many of these state assemblies. What you always find is executive bill. Is the governor sending a bill, they don't make the law, they are not that firm. And of course, why would they want the state assembly to be independent, talking of the governors? Why would the governors want local governments to be financially independent when indeed joint accounts, they can always go there, siphon and get money for campaigns? Why would they want, judiciary, state judiciary to be independent when indeed they can always stifle them, tell them what to do and all that stuff? It also means that we still have a lot to learn when it comes to democracy. We were talking about 10 years ago, nascent democracy, young democracy. I think that at this age, Nigeria ought to be so stable in terms of democracy. So we want to see a situation where the governors, who indeed very soon they will start their own campaign, they should be having an agenda to keep saying, vote for me as governor. In this state, every local government will have its own money.
But some people actually believe that the governors are justified in their claims of not giving the local government autonomy because it sort of undermines their authority as state governors.
How will it undermine the authority when indeed if you give a local government its own money, it's going to have a kind of a sub-ministry just like the state government will have. You have a councillor for works and housing, they take care of feeder roads, rural roads. You have a councillor for healthcare facilities will be provided at the local government level. You also have a councillor for agriculture in terms of food security. I mean, we should be having all of this. In terms of education, primary education, it should just be at the grassroots level. No wonder these governors rush to even go build, construct markets that is supposed to be under residual law belonging to the local governments. And so when the governors are just grabbing all of this, when indeed the local governments, if you give them their chances, it's not going to be undermining their authority. Rather, it's going to support them to realize the general fundamental objective of good governance, because at the local government level, you've taken care of health facilities. At the local government level, in terms of security, you're going to have this. By the way, the other aspect of it is state police. Some local state governments are saying no to all of this. If the 19 local governments in the north at the point voted some 3 weeks ago to say this, they are thumb up for this local government community policing or state policing, so be it. So already you have 19 states, and where are some other states that just add that 24, you have the majority. But I'm wondering why.
This is something that you will think that there's some kind of level of consensus that have been reached as far as it is concerned, like the issue of state police that you have mentioned. Southern governors have since endorsed the issue of state policing. Northern governors have also agreed that, I mean, not just northern governors, including traditional rulers, have agreed that it's time to have this, happen. So which states are actually withholding this, the process and delaying the whole thing?
Well, honestly, you know, when people sit around under the table, you don't know who is kicking the other because the surface of the table has actually covered your vision. In other words, are there some people who publicly will say, thumb up for this state police, but under there they just say forget about it, let's play to the gallery. But I tell you that this insecurity we are seeing, if at the local government level they've started nipping some of these things at the board, it will not spread around every state, and from every state it now goes to federation. No wonder many of these governors, before you know it, there's an attack in their local government, they are rushing to the villa. Mr. President, please help us with the army. There's another one in another state, 2-3 governors, you see them lining up. Oh, you are aware there were attacks in our states, and that's why we've come to brief Mr. Governor, His Excellency, the President, so that he deploys military. They are no longer even talking of police. We should be the lead agent when it comes to, or agency, when it comes to internal security should be the police. And if we have every state having the police and the work together with the federal police, I tell you, we'll reach somewhere.
All right, so talking about the damage that have been caused by insecurity, we see that on page 34, there's a story here where the Chief of Defense Staff is, giving a breakdown of the losses that have been incurred as a result of the fight against insurgency. So he says 100,000 people have been killed so far. Over 2 million have been displaced. We see that the armed forces have received at least 2.5 trillion naira in budgetary allocations, to deal with the issue of insurgency. And then losses, damages that have been incurred amounts to $9 billion, talking about, over 3 trillion naira, in all of this. So that's the magnitude of the effects that we are dealing with as it concerns issue of security. So that necessitates us to also for us to continue this conversation about state policing.
Absolutely. And tell me the state that doesn't have a kind of a mini security agency, whether to collect tax, like you have Castelia in Kaduna State, or you have a civilian joint task force in northeastern part of this country. By the time
you have Amotekun in the southwest.
Exactly.
And now, they are all not armed anyways.
They are not all armed, but why? When people say don't arm them, but you leave the miscreants who indeed are armed. I think we are missing the point. What ought to be done is, let's train these people. When they are trained and they say, you have the discipline in terms of handling the gun and it is legally given onto you. I mean, there are checks and balances when people begin to hold guns, provided they are trained. And I think that when the state governments join together and they set up state police, it's going to work. How is it going to work? Check where you have the civilian joint task force in northeastern part of this country. Wherever you see the army, you always see them. And because these are youths, male, female, you see them, they know the community, they know everybody, and I tell you, the criminals tend to fear them. Why do they fear them? Because they know them.
All right.
Because if you check, let me make this point, let me just land. If you check the army, the way sometimes they do their postings, you get some from Ogun State, send them to Maiduguri. Get some from Calabar, send them to Maiduguri. They still have to monitor, to know the geography, to know the terrain, when indeed the civilian joint task force, they all were born there.
Okay,
they
one of the
there, they farm there, and all that.
One of the arguments of those who are kicking against this whole state policing thing is the fact that politicians are likely to abuse the powers that they are going to have when they have, the state police in their states. So that argument seemed to be validated if you go by some of the recent stories that we are seeing of some sort of intimidation by, if you like, the government in power. So you see INEC summons parties over Electoral Act violation attacks on opponents. Just a few days ago, we saw in Kaduna how that there was attack on the PDP rally in Kaduna State, not forgetting also that at some point the Labour Party had tried to also, do their rally in Kaduna State, and they were disbanded somehow. You also hear stories from Zamfara State where the state government is shutting down media organizations completely for covering, a campaign rally of an opposition party in the state. So when you hear this kind of stories, it seems to validate arguments of the NLC president, who says we are not mature to go that way.
You see, darkness cannot override brightness. The night cannot stay forever. Day must break. That is just the truth of the matter. And when a governor, like a governor was telling an opponent, look, I was in your state, I was caged, so. I think that time there was a restriction in movement, and if, for example, El-Rufai felt he should go around that time, and there was restriction, and today he's saying that they went for stakeholders meeting or monitoring of election. It behoves on these leaders to also teleguide or guide their utterances. When he said, now I have the police, I have the SSS, I have the GOC, I think we should leave those agencies out of this political arena. So that does not mean because some people are expressing their opinions, we begin to fear the essence of having state police. I want to tell you that a time will come that we'll have a very refined Nigeria, and gradually many people who are opposed to this will always fizzle away. At the point when the police were fighting Civil Defense Corps, why do we need them? When indeed we have the police. But you have different rules, and everything is to ensure that you serve as stabilization force, that society must be stable via the security agencies, And that's, you have the Army, they have their role. Navy, you have your own role. Air Force, you have your own role. In the end, where is the end objective? So when some people begin to feel that, no, we don't need them, but what have you been able to provide? Is it good enough? If it is not good enough, of course, we have to expand the horizon, and time has come for it.
All right, well, talking about, still talking about the issue of security per se in this particular climate that we're in. One story that has actually made the rounds is INEC raising concerns about the spate of violence that has actually crept in. Ayuba alluded to it earlier when we saw attacks on some rallies in some particular states, and that's happened. The campaigns have just started, and already we're seeing political thuggery rearing its ugly head again, because we've always talked about it, we've always had it. Is there an end to this? And how bad an omen is this for the coming election?
Well, that men of conscience, led by General Abdul Salami, who never wanted to be head of state after all, but he got it and decided, look, civilians, come and take over your property. And today he's seen as father of modern democracy in Nigeria. So if we do have men of conscience like that, the Sultan, Bishop Kuka, and many others, I think that time has come to that the politicians, many of them belong to either Muslims or Christian faith. And of course, if you don't even belong...
The issue is whether or not they are going to stand by the promises that they have made to ensure a smooth and peaceful election, even as signed in the peace accords that they all signed and all of that. Whether or not they are going to do that, that's the doubt.
Because they're already being accused of jettisoning that particular accord.
This thing is just an appeal to conscience. Because the signing of an agreement didn't say, on the event that you renege, these are the consequences. Consequences do belong to the police agencies. As it is in Kaduna State, it's supposed to be that the miscreants who did all those mayhem, they're supposed to be themselves versus the commissioner of police, because it's a criminal matter. But what we are also saying is that let us begin to have, sanctity of life. Sanctity of human life, that life, everybody's life matters. That because one X, B or X or Y to win does not mean that you spill blood. So I think that, yes, the law will have to be very, very strong on that. And thank God there's a provision in INEC laws. When elections are on and within that area during elections, there's crisis, there's disruption of elections. Of course, usually the INEC has the power to cancel because their lives are in danger, materials in danger. So these are warning signals. If you
aside the cancellation of election, that will be during election. Yeah. But prior to election, just like we're seeing that INEC is now inviting parties over some of these violations, what powers are available for INEC and what can they actually even do before the election?
The power that INEC has is advisory, and the power they have now is the one they're exercising. Come, let us talk. You sign this and we witness it. Can you begin to imbibe, living in peace, non-violence when you are campaigning, so that we want to see a situation of that nature. Not that you create an army of miscreants, an army of people you think must support you by all means, that this election is a do or die, that I must win or we rock the boat. It shouldn't just be.
Should there be more punitive measures taken against the politicians themselves?
That's why there is this bill that is not yet on ground, with, that has not been signed into law, election violence act, a kind of something like that, to serve as deterrent. But even before that could come, you have the Criminal Act to ensure that the police takes, the police will always take action when there is a breach to peace, when people are killed or whatever. There are enough laws, not just the Electoral Act, but the violence when it comes to elections. But we're talking of even the Criminal Act that is available in terms of killing, in terms of possessing arms, in terms of unlawful assembly, in terms of destroying public peace. So the police will always have to do their jobs very well. And whoever is caught, just like we have now in Kaduna, we expect, when I say we, I mean Nigerians, we expect those that were involved, they should be facing the law by now to serve as deterrent.
All right, I would like for us to take a look at the editorial of the Daily Trust today, which is on page 17 of the paper. It talks about the Russia-Ukraine war. It says world leaders must intervene in Ukraine Russia war now. Have we seen enough pressure, or have we seen enough action on the side of global world leaders to bring an end to this war between Russia and Ukraine? All we've seen are sanctions, and it doesn't look like these sanctions are bringing an end to the whole crisis. So what else do we need to do?
You see, Antonio Guterres, Secretary General, when the General Assembly, where leaders go to meet, said one man, only one man, can stop this war as it is, and that is Vladimir Putin of Russia. If he says, we hereby stop, everything will end. It can be the Ukrainian president, another Vladimir. If he stops, Ukraine is finished. But you see, the demand of Russia is that, look, why should Ukraine join NATO? And Ukraine is also feeling, look, we need a protector in view of the fact that we have an aggressor around around the corner. Now, see the land grabbing on the side of the Russian president. You've done a referendum, went to Russian Duma, that's the parliament, and simply said, we have to annex some territories. You know, Donetsk is there, Luhansk is there, and many other places like that. He just annexed and simply said he needed it and sent in soldiers. See the colossal waste of Russian soldiers there. Now, what is he doing today? He is now sending, because on ground, Russia is not where to be found. He's now using missiles. You just send them and you target civilian facilities.
And what about the impact on African continent, the impact of this war on that part of the world, and what African leaders should be doing? We've seen that there have been meetings at the UNGA, but African leaders seem to do not seem to take a position on this and all that.
Yeah, you see, when there was supposed to be a UN Permanent Security Council voting on this crisis, the Russian foreign minister came to Africa. That of Ukraine also came to Africa to ensure that they woo Africans because of our shared number when it comes to voting. But again, it turned out to be 143 all voting against, and good African countries actually condemned the war. Why should we be doing some of these killings? And if you check, there's this group, they call it the Wagner Group. Wagner Group is led by a colonel, former colonel, friend to Vladimir Putin. And what does he do? He has a private army. When there was war in Chechnya, he was the one who led it. You go to Crimea, he was the one who led it. When it was in Syria, he was the one who in fact, suggested a general that brought in chemical weapons there. And that is why they have moved to Central African Republic. They are in Burkina Faso, they are in Mali, and they are conscripting and forcing people to start doing mining for them, getting money.
At the end of the day, we need to end this war.
Absolutely.
I think that's the whole. That's the whole idea of the editorial today.
And we just need maybe some religious leaders too. Maybe the Pope can come in. Look, gentlemen, let's go into sanctity of life. What you can't get via the arsenal, can we simply sit at the table, have a handshake, and everything ends? And if we begin to align, this is communist, this is social, this is called capitalism, the old days, I think it won't reach us anywhere.
All right, thank you so much. It's a good place to end the review at this point. Thank you. Because of time, we couldn't take more, but thank you for showing up on Daybreak this morning.
Thank you very much.
Our guest reviewer, Ben Shebang, the Director of News Voice of Nigeria, here with us. We'll take a short breather, and then when we return, it will be top of the hour. Time for us to take a look at the headlines again. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that you look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that. That's great.
Good morning and welcome. This is Daybreak on Trust TV. If you're just joining us, well, this is top of the hour and we're right here giving you nothing but the very best from the nation's capital. I am Ibrahim Yusuf.
And I am Ayuba Ilya.
All right, so we'll go straight into the headlines this morning at top of the hour. INEC 2023, INEC summons parties over Electoral Act violation, attacks on opponents.
Ethnic comment, Northern elders distance selves from Atiku.
And talking security now, police kill 2 kidnappers, recover 8.4 million naira ransom paid in Bauchi.
And these are the details of the stories. The Arewa Joint Committee has joined the widespread condemnation of a comment made by the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, during his interface with the committee on Saturday. Speaking with journalists, the chairman steering committee, Malam Murtala Aliyu, said that the same question administered to Atiku was asked other candidates too, adding that every response expressed by the various candidates of the various political parties is solely their opinion and has nothing to do with the fundamental objectives of the Joint Committee. The Joint Committee further stressed that the interactions were not planned with the goal of endorsing any candidate, adding that the maiden edition only sought to address the challenges of the North by any candidate who emerged victorious in the forthcoming general election. Meanwhile, presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party and former Vice President of Nigeria, Atiku Abubakar, has traveled to Europe, and the former Vice President left the country hours after he met Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja. There are reports that the PDP candidate left the country to seek medical attention, but Paul Ibe, his spokesman, denied this, saying that Atiku went on a business trip.
Shifting slightly away from politics now, 2 suspected kidnappers have been killed during an exchange of gunfire by police operatives at Mainamaji village, Al-Kaliri local government area of Bauchi State. The police equally arrested a 20-year-old kidnapper, Abubakar Isa, who was in possession of 8.4 million naira, suspected to be ransom money generated from victims. They also recovered an SMG rifle with 92 live ammunition, 1 empty magazine SMG OFN rifle, 1 7.62mm caliber of live ammunition, and 8 different models of phones. Bauchi State Commissioner of Police CP Umar Mamman Sanda, who paraded the suspects and other criminals on Tuesday in Bauchi, said security concerns in the society have assumed alarming dimensions, ranging from gender-based violence, thuggery, armed robbery, kidnapping, and banditry, among others. The police commissioner noted that the suspects alleged to have criminally conspired with others while armed with AK-47 rifles, pistols, and other dangerous weapons, carried out series of kidnapping, armed robbery, banditry, and cattle rustling along Al-Kareli, Das, Tafawa Balewa, Bogoro, and Toru local government areas of Bauchi State.
The Independent National Electoral Commission has convened a meeting with leaders of political parties over the rising spate of violence heralding campaigns for the 2023 general elections. The INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, said this in Abuja during a training of master trainers on election technology for the 2023 general elections. According to him, the clashes between opposing parties and their supporters during the ongoing campaigns across the country is worrisome. Yakubu's alarm is coming barely 3 weeks after the signing of peace accord by political parties and their presidential candidates, as championed by the National Peace Committee.
Now we'll take a look at some news reports. Bread is a favorite food for many families, but recently the rise in prices is changing all that. Bread is now going beyond the reach of the poor, and Abdullahi Ahmadi reports that some bakeries in Katsina are struggling to survive the harsh economic realities. Let's take a look.
In Katsina, over 250 bakeries have collapsed, while about 310 struggling to remain in the business as a result of the high cost of baking materials. Even those that are trying to strike a balance are producing way below par, resulting in loss of jobs along the value chain. The industry is burdened by an unprecedented cost of materials, compounded by unpredictable cost of diesel and exchange rate, which has led to loss of over 6,000 jobs.
The flour, which we used to buy like 12,000, 11,500 before, is now 27,500, almost to 28,000. The oil, which is the groundnut oil we used to do it, is almost 32,000 plus. Sugar is 30,000, 31,000 plus, I believe. These are, and other materials, even the firewood. So that's the reason why there is increment of prices in all the breads for now.
Here, only 3 staff remain out of 42, baking 3 bags of flour daily instead of 18 bags in the past. Even at that, they resorted to producing what they called chin-chin bread to meet the demand of the majority that cannot afford a loaf of bread. Why are you asking this kind of question? In any case, this is a business. If I cannot make profit, I have to have a rethink. I honestly pity the young chaps I sacked from this bakery. I used to see some of them touting, while others are scavenging, but this is against my wish. Bakers are not happy that the government has not shown concern for their plight, which forced many to produce below capacity and downsize the number of their staff. They are also saying the industry is at the verge of collapsing if nothing is done urgently to salvage bakeries. The industry is key to the sustenance of socio-economic well-being of the people of Katsina State, considering the number of people along the value chain. As a leader, if I tell you that I am happy with the closure of some bakeries, I am lying. I urge government to come to our aid. Beyond that, those who are detached from the value chain or sacked have now resorted to scavenging, with many at the mercy of elements. Describing the situation as worrisome, the national president of Association of Master Bakers and Caterers of Nigeria is appealing to government to give them a bailout to prevent the risk of total collapse of the industry.
We are in very serious, challenging situations. The situation is daunting because a lot of our members have shut down their bakeries. About 30 to 40 and it's 5% of our members nationwide have shut down the bakeries and are still counting. The situation is not encouraging at all.
Unless this is done quickly, observers are saying the future of the industry in Nigeria is bleak and poses threat to the fragile peace being enjoyed in some parts of the country. Abdullahi Ismail Ahmadi, Trust Television News, Katsina.
All right, thank you for that report, Abdullahi. Now let's take a look at our next discussion on the program. Over 600 people have been killed and more than 1 million people displaced in the worst flooding that Nigeria has experienced in a decade. That's what we'll be looking at, but that will be after this short breather. Please stay with us.
TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
All right, thanks for staying. Now, according to the Minister for Disaster Management, Sadia Umar Farouk, the recent floods in the West African nation have become an overwhelming disaster, as most of the states were not fully prepared, despite several warnings. The reasons for the disastrous flood in the nation is said to be heavy rain and climate change. However, if experts are to be believed, poor planning and infrastructure has exacerbated the damage. According to experts, flooding is expected to continue until the end of November. This is focused on the discussion at this moment, and we have in the studio Honorable Frederick Agbedi, representing Sagbama Ekiremo Federal Constituency of Bayelsa State, to talk to us about this. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigerians.
Right. You're welcome. All right. Well, this is something that there have been, I would say, we saw coming. If I can say that, we saw it coming, because there have been predictions by NIMET that we are in for a series of flooding, perhaps unprecedented one like we've never seen before. So, and this is not new. It's something that happened virtually every year. But it looks like we are caught off guard in our responses to it. What do you say to this?
Yeah, first let me empathize with all the victims, you know, the various states, communities, local governments that are so impacted by this massive, you know, flood, you know, across Nigeria and even beyond, you know. I know that the situation is not limited to Nigeria, you know. There are other continents and nations that are also affected by this same situation, which apparently has to, like you said, got to do part of it with climate change, you know, and then the issues of dam and normal flooding that also are associated with the seasonal changes, you know. But coming back home, clearly, I want to agree with you that flood is nothing new, not anything strange. The question has been, how have we as a nation, as a people, been prepared for it? You know, if you come to my local government, every year you have a number of communities that for some 3-4 months they are underwater. They are used to it. There's nothing they can do about it. Government has done nothing to alleviate their situation. So for them, well, this is part of life, and we've got to live with it. So when a government, a nation, do not prepare for both the anticipated, expected, and the unforeseen, then you are bound to have the worst situation, time without number. We are in the worst situation. This flood is worse than what we experienced in 2012. And between even 2012 and today we're talking about, we have had different, you know, levels of flooding every year. What has government done in this regard? You know, clearly we haven't done.
So could
anything.
it be that perhaps the perception is that, well, this is normal, we are going to cope with it as we have always done? Perhaps the magnitude of the floods that we are seeing now was not envisaged in the first place.
Yeah, but the consideration is, have we ever coped? No. No. There is no given time that, yes, it happened and we're able to cope with it. No. It's just say, yes, take faith, whatever that happens, this will come to pass. And at the end of it, we all forget about what we had gone through. You know, that is the problem we have. Take, for example, when the flood is ravaging, experts will be talking about, okay, building shelters and all that. Ask yourself in Nigeria, is there anywhere in this country that shelters are built, that in case this happens, people of this state will move to these shelters in so place, people of state B will move to these shelters in so place, people of State C will move to shelter in so place. There is nowhere in this country where shelter is built, where you evacuate the people when situation like this arises. So we are a momentous people, completely a momentous people. When the moment comes, you hear the whoos and cries. At the end of it, life becomes normal. Whether you lost everything in it or not, nobody cares again. Yes, you are back home, move on, and we'll move on, waiting for the next to happen. And so if we continue to run our society in this way, how do we expect that things will get better? It will never get better. Okay, take for example, some people claim that it is Cameroon opening their dams and blah, blah, blah. Over the decades, didn't Nigeria anticipate that other countries were building their dams? And at the moment they opened their dams, there was going to be impact on our country. And then we expect, experts have also said, build some 3-4 dams across the river Niger, Benue, to be able to take care of this situation. Experts have also recommended that there's massive siltation in our rivers. So there should be dredging to deepen this river so that it will have capacity to collect more water. None of these things is going on.
Well, the proactive measures actually have not been taken, and we've always said, we've always seen these kind of situations. For example, he alluded to it, that we got warnings that this was going to happen, and we still waited, and it happened. We didn't take any steps. So we've always been a reactive sort of people. But a lot of people now, with this current flood situation, are even complaining that even the reaction is not what is expected, and that the people who have been affected by this, the victims, are not receiving the required relief or the required attention that they feel they should receive after a disaster like this.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and I agree with the views of the people. And that is the same view I'm expressing. Take, for example, NIMED says flood is coming. If you go to some states, including my state, you see canals and rivers being opened up, in anticipation that when the flood comes, this will help assuage the situation. But whether that is enough to actually assuage the situation is the challenge we are seeing now. Maybe the number of canals, drainages that are opened up are not enough to capture the quantum of water that is flowing into the various communities and various states. So it has actually not helped the situation as much as we expect. Now, when we talk about relief materials, whether government is reaching them or not, take for example, the Bayelsa Caucus of the National Assembly held a press conference saying Bayelsa is severed from the rest of the country. So I listened to the Minister for Humanitarian Services saying that we have dispatched food supplies and all that to various victims, across all the states. Take, for example, Bayelsa is severed from the rest part of the country. So can your truck get to Bayelsa? Not possible. You can't access Bayelsa. And we sit down here and said, we have distributed palliatives, support has gone to all the states. Have you been able to even discuss and analyze how these things you said you have distributed will get to Bayelsa? It will not. It is not possible. Are you talking with experts? Are you talking with the state? Yes, agreed. My governor appreciated Mr. President. Our National Assembly caucus also appreciated Mr. President for giving the directives that all agencies involved, in rendering services at this time should quicken action to ensure that, support services get to the people. But when the minister says, we have done this, is that enough for people in Bayelsa to say, yes, relief is coming? You should understand how these relief materials that you are talking about that have left your office, your warehouses, how they will get to the people. Because getting to the people is the most important thing. The people getting that succor and relief is the most important thing. Sending them out, sending your officials to say, yes, we are doing it. It's not what it is today. As we speak today, if you go to Bayelsa, you can't access food. You can't access medication, particularly within those who are outside certain radius where you cannot come from your community to the state capital, or you cannot come from your location to the city center to be able to pick what you want. So you can see the governor on his toes every day, moving with canoes, moving with boats, moving sometimes with helicopter to see what is going on and appealing to the people to cooperate. You know, it's a massive thing.
Okay.
But the other expectation is that, you know, in times like this, you see even the military taking responsibilities. You see it in other climes. So in disasters like this, the military, army, air force, navy mobilize your assets, you know, by air. But if Bayelsa is cut off, Bayelsa has an airport. Can the Air Force take food items, airlift items to Bayelsa Airport?
Hopefully the airport is not submerged.
It's not submerged.
Because yesterday I saw reports of how even hospitals, schools, and other government institutions are submerged and all of that. And that also speaks to...
As I speak to you, my house in my local government headquarters has been underwater for almost 2 weeks. My house in Yanangoa has been underwater for about a week.
So now, in this instance, now that we have all of this happening, how do we deal with the likelihood of a health crisis?
Of course, it's already there.
That could, you know, break out as a result of this. And if we have hospitals submerged underwater, what are our options?
The options, as we speak, are that there have to be massive mobilization. All agencies, be it in the armed forces, be it in humanitarian services, you know, both within the country and internationally, there has to be massive mobilization. And that's where I was even talking about with even the military intervention. You know, they also render medical services when situations like this arise. So mobilize all strata of support to the people. Because right now, I know that at the point they moved some patients from the Niger Delta University Teaching Hospital, some patients gave up, including my elder brother's wife. Died in the process of moving from that teaching hospital to the Federal Medical Center. She gave up. A lot of others died in that process.
Do you think that our institutions are prepared for the magnitude of what we are seeing right now? I mean, this flood is happening in 28 states out of the 36 states, you know, of the country and all of that. So how prepared are we really to, you know, be everywhere, you know, even at the same time?
We are certainly ill prepared. That's the truth of the matter. We are certainly ill prepared. Yes, NIMET was saying this was going to happen, but what were we doing towards? And that's why I talked about the issue of even shelters. You know, for how many decades? Even between 2012 and today, have you built one shelter? So we are ill prepared. In fact, we're not prepared at all. It's not a matter of even being ill prepared. We're not prepared at all. It was like the moments come and the moments go. So why do we bother? Wait for the moment to come and it will certainly go.
I mean, some would say, some would say, I mean, you are in government as well. I mean, being a lawmaker and all of that. At your own level as lawmakers from Bayelsa State, for instance, what have you been able to do in this instance, and what are you maybe planning or whatever?
First, I had cause to say in the floor of the House of Reps that the life of a Nigerian is now equal 1 minute silent because of the speed of insecurity and the way lives were mowed. Now, this issue of flood is a similar narrative where every year Parliament is talking about flood, relief materials, help, build shelters, but each time the budget comes, you will not find any of such things. You suggest that this has happened, flood has cut off this road, we need one span bridge so that it will now allow water movement. You know, instead of the culverts that the water will pull off and then spread into communities, do a one-span bridge, do a two-span bridge in this location so that the movement of water will flow freely, so that it can save communities. It will never be a priority, and you will never find it in any budget. So the point is that we are not doing anything. Yes, we raise it. And as Parliament, once you put that in the budget, they will say you have padded the budget. It is an envelope budgeting system. So a ministry will tell you, this is what my envelope can capture, and so any other thing that is going to bring support to the people is not included in my envelope, and so these are the issues. For us at the National Assembly, it is our duty from the various states to continue to bring the pains of our people to the center to say, what can we do to alleviate the situation? Other than that, back home is to continue to talk with our people, is to continue to felicitate with our people, is to continue to also render our little support in one way or the other to ensure that, that most of the times in Parliament, we also do medical intervention. With this kind of situation, I know that a number of colleagues from our state, in our next constituency budget, we will have to do with medical interventions, so that now people need medical attention. As the water recedes, there will be medical attention, and thereafter. So there are issues of before, within, and after. And we are ready to do the little we can contribute within our reach and capacity to ensure that succor is brought to our people.
All right. Well, still on that, since you actually brought it up, I mean, you've talked about the three catches, the three stages: the before, the during, and after. Well, the before has gone now. We haven't done anything, and we're facing it now. We're currently in it. So let's look at the after. Now, we've talked about a health crisis that might brew after this, which we know will come, and things that need to be done. What about the economic aspect of it? For example, now, let's bring it back to Bayelsa. When these waters recede and things, the flooding is no longer active, definitely people will need to get back on their feet. Are there any plans to make sure that this happens? As a representative of the people, is there anything that you are putting in place to make sure that people have something to fall back on after this crisis? Yes, and that's why I talked about even we as parliamentarians considering medical interventions, from our constituency interventions that usually we have. Thank God this is a budget period, and so you have seen the situation yourself, so you must think on how your own contribution can also alleviate, the suffering of the people. Other than that, yes, of course, back home, the government will look at a number of issues. Take, for example, after this flood, so many of our roads will be impassable. And so government, first quick responsibility is to ensure that there is some remediation process where you can now move goods and services from one point to the other. That is first and the most important thing. Thereafter, you will be talking about medical services, because this water is going to move all kinds of debris from one point to the other. And that is where you expect that even an epidemic is going to come. So medical services will be of utmost importance. It will
you even increase the capacity of ensuring that no epidemic, arises out of this. Thereafter, you'll be talking about economic services. Sometimes you see that as we speak, the state government is providing relief materials, food services, and all that. A few days ago, I was talking with the governor. Because the roads are cut off, how do we even get food from outside into the state? The only option available right now, like we know, is either that the Air Force is using their planes to convey relief materials to the airport, and then from that point, maybe the state can find a way through canoes to move these things to the city center, or you have to pass through Delta State, Warri, because it's a mangrove swamp area. They are not affected by this massive flood. So you take boats and take these materials from that point straight to Yanagwa, or from Port Harcourt straight by river to Yanagwa. These are the only sources through which you can take quantum of relief materials to Bayelsa State. All right. Otherwise, you won't be able to, save the situation at least. And there will, as we speak now, there may even be shortage of food, because what the people have been buying will be the food that was available within the state before this cut off from the rest of the...
All right. Now, a lot of people have been asking the question since after a similar incident that happened in 2012. What has been done? There have been several recommendations, like you mentioned earlier, about building buffer dams, also talking about dredging of the major rivers. Yes. What happened to the contracts in those respects? Are we likely to see some kind of probe or investigation by the House of Representatives into what happened to the construction of those buffer dams as well as the dredging of the rivers?
Yeah, of course, with what has happened, there are going to be discussions to the extent as to which were the dams that were intended to salvage this situation over time, that the federal government got involved in, whether they are completed or they are not, and at what stage of completion, what was the extent of finances that were put in, and why were they not achieved. These questions will regenerate, and I'm sure that through investigation we'll be able to find out what. But speaking very critically, from 2012 to date, I haven't really seen a situation where the federal government says these projects, be it dams, be it dredging, that these projects are intended to remedy a flood situation. I haven't heard. As a Nigerian that is an adult, as a parliamentarian that has served this country for a couple of years, I haven't heard. That deliberate tendency to say, assuming this reoccurs, these stopgap measures we have taken will salvage the situation, I haven't heard it being taken. And so Parliament, with this massive flood, which is even much more than the 2012 flood, we are going to put our thinking caps, our research departments together to really unearth how much we have done as a nation, as a government, to see that we remedy this situation.
Okay, we are likely to see food shortages.
Of course, yes.
Food security insecurity is facing us as a result of this flooding. I mean, thousands of hectares of farmlands have been submerged as a result of this. So what should we be doing to avert any kind of food crisis that is likely to follow this? I mean, this is harvesting period.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of farmers have lost a lot of things. Right now we have policies that is banning importation of certain food items. Is it time to revisit that, maybe for the time being, so that we can avert the likelihood of a food crisis, which we are already in anyways?
Of course, in a critical situation like this, you have to reverse certain decisions to ensure that first, your people have access to food, have access to medication. And so you cannot, in a stricter sense, thinking process, say, oh, this is the decision, this is the law of this nation, and so we'll keep it. You remember that sometime in 1983, we had the essential commodities, where government bought rice and other essential commodity and distributed to across the nation to workers, and all that. So you pay some percentage of money, to buy that. We are back to that kind of situation, where government has to make it possible to access foodstuffs wherever they can be found, whether it is as to importing it. Because if the flood recedes, you cannot immediately go back to farm and then harvest food and then come to. So that food scarcity is expected, and it's going to be across the nation. So government will ensure that wherever they will have access to food for the people, medication for the people, whether it requires importation, certainly that has to be done to alleviate the suffering of the people in the interim before you talk about going back to the farm. Because like you said, farmers didn't harvest their farms. I know my wife has a small farm, and within this period, she was struggling to make sure that she harvested everything before the floods. The last day she showed me how she was driving through the river, and I warned her never to try it anymore, because it will be suicidal for you to be a victim of the flood, yes, but when life is lost, it's a more colossal damage.
Double tragedy.
So exactly. I told her never. But today, she's selling part of her harvests to the people. And we're also eating part of it at home.
All right.
All right, so finally, before we go quickly, are we likely to see any proactive measure as a fallout of this now? We saw it in 2012, nothing was done, now we're seeing it again. Are we likely to see it?
Yeah, for us at the federal level and for us in Parliament, we are going to insist. We're certainly going to insist that it can't be as business as usual, that if in 2012 we didn't see any difference, preceding years we didn't see any difference, and we have come to see this. In fact, it will be foolhardy for.
Unfortunately, the Parliament have few months to go.
It doesn't matter.
It's almost 2023 election, certainly.
The Parliament, yes, few months to go, will be working till June next year. And
hopefully the parliamentarians will not be carried away by the election, by the campaigns.
Yes, you see, campaigns, you can't even do any meaningful campaign, particularly for those of us from the grassroots. You can't do any meaningful campaign until the water is dried off, That's the truth of the matter. So in between this period, you struggle to be with your people. You also come back to do your work and ensure that the suffering of your people is brought to the discussion table. So there are certain decisions that will alleviate the situation, going forward, will now be, taken. So that we now have to also interact with the executive arm of government to ensure that, now that it is so, we have to review certain things in our budget to take care of some of these situations. Because next year is not far away anymore.
All right, thank you so much. This is where we would have to end the discussion. We thank you for coming on Daybreak and giving us more insight on this. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Our guest is Honorable Frederick Agbedi. He is House of Representatives member representing Sagbama Ekeremo Federal Constituency of Bayelsa State, talking to us about some of the efforts and way forward as far as this is concerned. We'll take a short breather now, and then when we return, we'll take a look at other issues on the program. Please stay with us.
Welcome back to Daybreak on Trust TV. Now it's time for us to look at our second topic for the day, and it has to do with the economy. Now, the inflation rate in Nigeria rose for the 8th straight month to 20.77% in September. And the MBS attributed the likely cause of the rise to disruption in the supply of food products, increase in import costs due to the persistent currency depreciation, and a general increase in the cost of production. Now, on a year-on-year basis, in September 2022, the headline inflation rate of 20.77% was 4.14% points higher compared to the rate recorded in September 2021, which was 16.63%. Now, let's try to make sense of this, and we have joining us via Skype, financial analyst and CEO, Ashir Dynamic Solution, Mukhtar Mohammed. Good morning and welcome to Daybreak.
Good morning. How are you doing? Good morning.
It's nice to have you again.
Always a pleasure to be on your program.
All right. So inflation is still on the upward trajectory, which is a negative for us. Is there any end in sight to this rise in inflation, going by the current state of things?
Definitely no any hope yet. It's a global trend. Every economy in the world is battling inflation at the moment. There's no end in sight yet, especially with our a three-dimensional situation, which has really not helped us. One, cost inflation, currency depreciation, production inflation, macroeconomic inflation. So when you look at all these issues, you are not seeing any immediate solution to it, even in the short term. So definitely, inflation has become a global language now. Just this morning, the UK economy inflation went up by 10.1%. So it's becoming normal for us to talk about inflation. But it's what are we going to do to cut the trend, just like other developed economies are doing, or developing economies are doing. And basically, you need to have... What we've seen in Nigeria is that the monetary side has always done their best, but the fiscal side seems to be non-existent.
So talking about physical sides, what are those elements that we are perhaps not paying attention to?
We're not paying attention to taxes. We are not looking at taxes as means to grow our economy. The physical side is not looking at our projects, and most of those key projects, infrastructural projects, to grow the economy and create jobs for Nigerians. How do you do that? It's using those projects as a collateral to begin to see how companies can come in, foreign companies move through foreign direct investment. That will now beef up our reserve, because they are not only coming with naira, they'll be coming in with dollars. So they are not looking at that. The fiscal side, what the fiscal side is just saying is building infrastructure by borrowing, and more of this borrowing is causing more liquidity into the system and it's hyping inflation. So definitely the fiscal side seems to be doing something different from the monetary side. And I see the monetary side are always trying to mop up inflation, mop up currency, mop up and whatever they think is in the system. So I think if the synergy come, then the physical side, if they begin to look at how to get more Nigerians out of the poverty level, either through direct intervention in area of key needs of Nigeria, average Nigerians, then definitely that also could help bring down inflation.
Well, you talked about using taxes as a way of getting revenue, of generating revenue. But the thing is, we're in the middle of an economic crunch. And if as you jerk up taxes, aren't you making it difficult for the same people that you are supposed to try to help? Because whether you talk about individual or corporate taxes, it's still the same thing. As an individual, I am looking for this. We're all looking for this money that we don't have. And you're asking me to pay more when it comes to taxes. If it is corporate taxes, I'm trying to grow a business. I'm feeling the crunch right now. It's difficult for me to survive. And you're asking me to pay more taxes. How does that relate?
It was that we should think of ways of using taxes to grow the economy. explanation. What I mean by that is instead of taxing our people the more, we should begin to think of how we can grow the economy by using taxes as a means whereby we give companies tax holidays, and these companies are able to employ more Nigerians and bring them out of the poverty level. That's what I mean. I don't mean increment in terms of taxes. What I mean by use taxes to grow your economy is that you attract more companies into your economy by giving them tax holiday, and then by that you give them projects like what we see some companies are doing in Dangote, with that from their papa as it's even up. We see that happen. MTN is planning to do that in the east also. That is the Owerri Onitsha axis road. So definitely that's what I'm saying. We give them tax holiday for them to come in and begin to bring a lot of activity. It's only a government, but if you're a government and your revenue is taxes, it's always a difficult thing to do, like what is happening to the British economy, because the British, their greatest revenue is from taxes. So if they bring down tax, it will hamper their revenue, and that's why you see their economy is somehow in a crisis. But ours, we've not even gotten to any area in terms of taxes. We are widening the tax back. Definitely this administration have earned more tax than any other administration. But the challenge is that, like you said, you are taxing more. You are not even widening the tax bracket that much. Rather, you are going after companies and you are telling them what to pay as tax, not really what they are even making. So definitely that's the difference.
Mm. All right. So, I mean, there's quite a lot of factors that are fueling this issue of inflation, like you earlier mentioned. This is a global trend. A lot of forces that are outside the control of governments and states is, contributing to this. We talk about the Russia-Ukraine war. We talk about climate change. We talk about energy crisis and all of that. Disruption in this food supply chain, and all these are factors, contributing to this. So when you look at another thing added to the list now, which is another dimension to the issue of climate change, which is floods here in Nigeria. Thousands of farmlands have been submerged and all of that. What's your projection as we move into the coming year, and especially with campaigns setting in?
You know that as campaigns have started, and you journalists know that governors are taking the backseat. That's why we are not seeing the kind of response. Even though
the president is calling on his lieutenants not to focus on campaigns, but pay attention to governance, despite the season.
They are not. You just need to go to the Ministry of Labor. The Minister of Labor for State is the spokesman for the APC presidential campaign. You can see that all the governors are following the presidential candidate up about. So let's not go into that. Matter what they are trying to say, that the president himself knows. Are not taking the back seat, would have seen a proactive response to the kind of flooding that we have experienced. We've never experienced it in Nigeria. That is even affecting some places that are cash cow of the nation. It's even have not risen up to their responsibility. Where you won't blame the federal government alone. So even the state government, if you look at Delta State, the Delta State governor is busy campaigning, is the vice presidential aspirant of the PDP, so he's busy campaigning. So it's not even in his state, and that's one state that has been worst hit by flood also. You look at Kogi State, instead of the governor to face the issues that are having there, he's busy fighting Dangote, and his people are out there. So definitely you know that governors have taken the back seat. Going forward, what are we going to expect? We're going to see the inflation figures go higher, especially we saw a marginal decline in terms of price of food because of the little result we've gotten in the area of security. We realized that the government were tackling that area. Look, Zamfara became peaceful. We're not getting so much news about the kidnapping or farmers not able to go to farm any longer. But just before recently, the governor, whether it's a political move, came tell us that, look, because of banditry also, they are trying to stop campaigns. So those also, that if you put that into consideration, you definitely know that the price index will definitely go up. Okay. Flooding has become a major issue.
All right,
definitely going forward, we expect that to happen.
Okay, sorry to interject, but with the recent, should I call it onslaught now on the on oil thieves in the Niger Delta that we're seeing. The government seemed determined to deal with the issue of oil thefts, and that way we'll be able to boost our production. Do you think that will perhaps help the issue of the devaluation of the naira, for instance?
It will help in a little way. Maybe it will help in boosting our reserve with some billions, maybe 1 to 2 billion. That could help our reserve get to the 40 billion mark that we've always consistently maintained. But again, in the long run, you know, the problem is not even, yes, production is a problem, but you know that the major challenges that we are facing, that we have not been able to get revenue into our reserve, is because of the subsidy. Subsidy is a main challenge, and government is not ready to take the bull by the horn. So even if you increase the oil output, which I believe we will be able to do that with a kind of new Tom Polo discovering about 38 points of thief. This morning, they say they've discovered more. Even this morning, Seplat, also an energy, crude oil, an energy company, say it has reduction about 24% in their production because of oil thief. So you can see that it's not only affecting government revenue, it's beginning to have a flow into the private companies also. Okay. So definitely, we will see those numbers increase in terms of revenue with the result we are having. But okay, again, what we gain in terms of production, we lose in terms of payment of fuel subsidy.
All right, so by way of rounding up, just in 1 minute, if you may, should we be comforted looking at the inflation rates in other climes in the African continent? For instance, you have a Zimbabwe that is recording 280% inflation rate. You have Ghana 37% and all that. So looking at ours and all that, it appears that we are managing well. Do you think so?
You look at our resources. I can't but agree that we are managing well, but we shouldn't compare ourselves with Zimbabwe and Ghana, especially Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe has been in this crisis for years and years during the time of Robert Mugabe up to this moment. They've not been able to remember the exchange rate of the dollar. There's about almost a currency to a dollar. So we should be looking at South Africa as our trademark. We are the two biggest economy. We should be competing within ourselves, we and South Africa. I think that should be our benchmark. For Ghana, you know, Ghana is suffering that because of the depreciation of their currency. Their currency is one of the worst performing currency in the world at the moment. So when you look at that, yes, you say we are doing well, but I still believe that if the physical side is able to come together with the monetary policy sides, we'll get a better result going forward. All right, thank you so much.
Mukhtar Mohammed, CEO, Ashia Dynamic Solution. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak and sharing your perspectives. I appreciate it. All right, that's our show for today. In case you've missed, you can always catch up across all our social media platforms. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch us live 24/7. My name is Ayuba Ilya.
And I am Ibrahim Yusuf. Let's do it all again tomorrow. Have a lovely day.